Oh, you can't just come out and try to win money, try to look cool. He said, that's not why we dance. The ones who are out there spectating, those are the people that you dance for. Some of them, maybe they're in wheelchairs. He said, you dance for them. Some of them have heavy hearts. They lost a loved one, so you dance for them. When you dance, the people can see your heart. If it's in a good place, their spirit is uplifted. Healing takes place. Let your steps be a prayer. It's a celebration. The relationship that America has with its indigenous people, it's not a good one. People will look at Native people and say, high suicide rate there, alcoholism. Why can't they just get it together like everybody else? But they don't understand what was done to the Native people had a devastating effect. War, genocide, hate, being told that you're evil, that you're less human, devastating impact, on who we are, our culture, our identity. It's kind of like a bomb. Each generation is feeling that shockwave still. The whole culture of hip hop, I was really drawn towards it, because I thought it was just really cool. Also, what the rappers were talking about, the inner cities and the struggle of being oppressed. What they were talking about was like, hey, what we were going through too. Kind of gave us a voice. As time went on, we heard natives rapping. These guys are telling their story. Shoot, I'll tell my story too, So we would freestyle and we would write lyrics down. We started expressing ourselves, talking about the res. Oh, hey, this guy's from the res, like me, I really loved the sound of scratching. I saved up money, firefighting to buy myself a turntable. I would just spend hours, just perfecting my craft. We just had to learn everything ourselves. Hearing somebody else saying, hey, that sounds good, man, that's cool. That passion always just built up. I finally got introduced to an artist who was doing what I wanted to do. He was a native out there, rapping and traveling. I sent him my demo, and he's like, yo, I like it. Let's work together. Let's go out on tour. Okay, I'm gonna make this sacrifice. I'm gonna leave my family and go out here. And so that's what I did. Early on, my mind was in a different place. And I started to kind of get a little taste of fame, so to speak. I enjoyed that. It made me feel good. I made some mistakes in that realm. Thinking about what I did, thinking about my family, my wife, and, my future, just everything. I was just like, nah, that's not who I want to be, I don't really want to be this person, I don't want to be this guy. Right after that, I started taking steps towards being that person of positivity and love and expressing that through my music. Speaking out for Native rights or, human rights, I was never that person. I was just go with the flow type. I started to travel. I started to see different cultures, different Native cultures, the way these people view natives. You're open to what's going on, even about my own culture and who I am. There's a lot of crazy things going on. I felt I had to say something because people were listening to me. The cultural aspect, the dancing and what I do, I never wanted to do it for a gimmick. When I wear my regalia, it's not just fashion. It has a deep meaning. The beadwork that my wife and my daughter did for me, they put their heart and their soul into every stitch. When they're sitting there, they're praying for me, Creator, watch over them, let them say good words. Wherever I go and I wear my outfit, I take my family with me. My wife is with me, my kids are with me, my ancestors, they're with me. I can't be drinking alcohol, doing drugs and wearing this thing, talking about crazy stuff because it's sacred, it's sacred to me. The platform that I have as an artist, it's a good place to be to educate people. Wearing my outfit, it grabs the listener. I'm able to share with them and educate them. People ask me, hey, what messages do you want to relate with your music? It's the basic message of love. I don't really have an agenda when I go do my presentations. Faith, hope, love. I just want to spread those messages, and however they receive those is the way it's going to go. You can never deny somebody's kindness, somebody's love, no matter what culture they come from, no matter what their view is. If you're giving love, you're helping people, you're gonna get that back. Our young people, they're dying. They're on drugs, they're on alcohol, they're struggling, with their identity. I'll get it in the inboxes and the emails afterwards, and they'll say, hey, I was one of those kids way in the back, and I just wanted to reach out to you and say, I think that's dope what you do, I was gonna commit suicide. And the more you talked and the more you shared, I felt like I wanted to face life, I felt like living. I heard your story, it was just like mine, man. I'm going through the same thing, but I think I'm gonna live, man. I'm gonna face life. Thank you for what you do. You saved my life, bam. So you hear a story like that and you realize the power and the gift that you have is making a difference, it's helping people. One of the most memorable performances was down in Mescalero, Apache. The whole community came out, there was like 1,000 people there. There was one moment where I got done and it was like a standing ovation. They were all just clapping, cheering. I stood there, just like nodding to the people. I could see their faces. I was connected with that crowd at that moment. And the way they looked at me, they were like happy. I just felt like crying. It's like, man, this is powerful. What I'm doing has meaning and it has a place, and it's a powerful thing. And it allows me to have that fire, that motivation to keep going, to keep making music, keep presenting, and keep doing what I'm doing.
We're going to go ahead and get started. Emily, if you want to go ahead and start.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Field. I'm an evaluation specialist here at USET. Some very quick audience participation tips, asks. Please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. We really want to know what kind of a reach we're getting on these. And everyone's going to be muted until the participant reflections portion. Feel free to raise your hand or ask questions in the chat throughout, and the session recording by the end of the week, and it will also have a little bit more information inside it. Next slide. Okay, disclosures. This activity is jointly provided by the United Southeastern Tribes and Cardia Services. Cardia is an approved provider for continuing education units. We are offering continuing nursing, medical, social work, and counseling units today. And in order to get those, you need to complete the hour with us. And towards the end of the hour, I'm going to share a link to the survey that you have to complete in order to get those credits. Also, if anyone attends the session later on and watches the recording, you can also claim continuing education units then as well. And There are no relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies for those involved with the ability to control the content of this activity. And that is all I have. Oh, and we are being recorded, by the way. That wasn't clear. All right, bye.
Thanks, Emily. Midakuye Oyase. Welcome, all my relations. I'm Bernice Jordan. I'm one of the public health program managers here at USET. So thanks for being in our space today. You are on Indigenous land, so we really want to learn and acknowledge what tribal nation land you and your organization are standing on. If you type in this website, nativeland.ca, that will show you, or you can text to this number 907-312-5085, and it'll, tell you what you're standing on. So we are reconnecting our Indigenous community. Thank you for being a part of reclaiming our collective stories. So the data that has on here that is gathered is where everybody is standing collectively right now. So we are reaching quite a few people from across the country. And I want to turn it over to, or I would like to introduce Holly Echohawk and turn it over to her. She is our friend and she will take it from here.
Hello, everybody. Happy to see you again. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Holly Echohawk. I'm from the Pawnee Nation in Oklahoma. I'm calling in from my home in the Portland, Oregon metro area. And, we've started this series this year. Many of you have been with us throughout the year on reclaiming Native psychological brilliance. And so we just want to remind you of the sessions that we've had. They're all available. If you missed one, they're all available on recording. And I won't go through all the topics, but you can see that we have a theme of brilliance, of acknowledging brilliance throughout all of the sessions. So today is session 7. We're super excited about today. And if we can go to the next slide. That's our wonderful logo that USET developed. So I'm going to take 4 minutes, only 4 minutes, and go through a couple of slides really quickly. One is the learning objectives for today. Fundamental to everything that we believe in, and I think you all share this belief, is Native people are brilliant, number one, period. I always say it's in our DNA, it's in our ancestry. Brilliance is everywhere. But Native brilliance is an asset to build on in treatment and recovery. So assume brilliance. If you have a Native person in front of you, regardless of what condition their condition is, whether they're quiet or demonstrative, they're brilliant. And you have a lot of assets to build on. The second learning objective today is increasing your understanding about the role of trauma and emotional loss that can lead to increased vulnerability for behavior choices and addiction. We're going to talk a little bit about the hungry ghost concept. And then we also want to broaden your mindset on addiction treatment and culture-centered care and support. Next slide. So just as a reminder, we do believe, I'll repeat myself because it's important, all Native people, especially Native young people, are brilliant. They're born brilliant. And that the Native brilliance equals assets and tools that you have when you're working with a Native person to build on during substance use treatment and recovery. And then the next slide, I want to show you just a few really quick slides on addiction in Indian country. This slide shows 20 years, starting in 1999 to about 2020, on the rate of drug overdose mortality, the loss of human life due to drug overdose. The highest line, the purple one, is American Indian and Alaska Native. So you can see that the loss of life that we've had in Indian country over the past 20 years has continued to go up. that little dotted line is a beginning of COVID. So you can see that the data goes a little bit past COVID and it's still going up. My goal in life, which I hope will be your goal in life, is all of our collective work will flatten that line out. If we want it to stop going up, we want it to flatten, and then we want it to go down. So next slide. One of the reasons that the mortality rate has gone up so high is because of fentanyl. And the misuse of any drug is dangerous, but methamphetamine drug use is also really concerning to tribal communities and people that use both methamphetamines, opiates, and stimulants combined, which is very common, very scary. But fentanyl has contributed greatly to that rise in mortality. So as an example, the vial on the left is the amount of heroin that would be a fatal overdose if ingested by an average sized man. The vial on the right, it says fentanyl, it looks like it's been emptied out. But oh no, those little specks at the bottom of the fentanyl vial, that's the equivalent of a fatal overdose for an average sized man. That's how deadly it is, and it's everywhere. It's in everything, anything you buy on the street. It's very possible will have fentanyl in it, and you don't know it, and that's why we're losing so many people. So next slide. Quick reminder of the definition of addiction from ASAM, the American Society of Addiction Medicine. It's treatable. It's a chronic medical condition. It's very complex, as you'll hear as we move forward with this hour. People who have addiction challenges use substances and engage in behaviors that obviously become compulsive, and they continue despite harmful consequences, despite their life falling apart, despite being in car wrecks, despite being in jail, despite all these having financial troubles. It's a compulsion. And then the next, and basically it's treatable. Addiction is treatable and is generally as successful in treatment as treatment for other chronic diseases. So the next slide, let me give you some examples of treatable chronic medical conditions. Diabetes, right? Pretty common, sadly, in Indian country. It's treatable. We all have people in our families that are diabetics, or we might ourselves be diabetic, and we take medicine for it to keep our blood sugar down. It's treatable. Same thing with hypertension, high blood pressure, also very common in Indian country. People who have high blood pressure take medicine, take treatment. They're encouraged to lose weight. They're encouraged to exercise more, but it's treatable. Same thing with asthma, another example. And then one more click, Brian. Same thing with addiction. It's treatable. Okay, then the next slide. So I hurried through that because we really want to get to our two speakers today. So we are so pleased to share with you, and I know you all were interested in this session partly because of the title, Substance Use and Hungry Ghosts. But we are really pleased to share with you a pre-taped video conversation with Dr. Gabor Mate. Many of you may know him. If you do not yet, you'll become a follower. He is a world-known physician who has worked with people who have suffered from living in the world of addiction. And he's worked in the addiction arena for many decades. He's based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and he works with the downtown area where, I don't want to use any negative terms, but it's an area where a lot of people who have addiction challenges live, and there's subsidized housing there, and his office is in those buildings. He works with a lot of Native people in Vancouver, British Columbia as well. So, and he talks about he has a book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and which is a really fabulous book. It's kind of thick. It's 400 pages. It's a fascinating read and a lot of lessons learned. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to look at the book. In that book, he explains what hungry ghosts are. And he says that hungry ghosts, which comes from a Buddhist principle. And he talks about hungry ghosts as describing those who exist in the hungry ghost realm are always seeking relief in substances, in objects, and behaviors that they hope will fulfill them and ease their pain. The next slide is one of the quotes from Dr. Mate that I really think is so important. Thank you. And it's really a key philosophy that he has, which is why he's so intriguing to listen to. He says most treatment facilities, addiction treatment facilities, focus primarily on trying to change the behaviors, like stop using, stop this, right? Instead of healing the pain that drives those behaviors. So we're going to share with you now the tape video of Dr. Mate, and then we're going to be followed by the great honor that we have to have Mr. Don Koyas with us, and he's going to provide some commentary on Dr. Mate's video, and I'll say a few words about Mr. Koyas after we listen to this 16 minutes of Dr. Mate.
It seems to me so much of this comes down to sort of embedded ways of thinking and refusing to kind of embrace newer ways of thinking. So, you know, as you come along and you explain a more compassionate approach through looking at this idea of dislocation. Similar, you know, parenting is one thing that you just touched on, this idea of, you know, subcultures who sort of have been historically exploited. That is the reason, that is the root cause of their having a worse addiction problem. So really, it's always about looking at these big societal problems as a whole.
That's right. If you look at dislocation, which is really a separation from our true selves and a separation from our culture and from other people, the more dislocation there is in a society, the more addiction you're going to see. And if you look at, for example, England in the 18th century, what happened is that you had this gin craze. People started just drinking gin. But what was going on at the same time? Enclosures were happening. People were being forced off the land. The communal lands were being taken over by the big landowners, forcing people into the cities to work in these dark satanic mills, to quote William Blake, these factories of the arising capitalist economic system. Total dislocation. Along with that, you had a rise in addiction. So that you can never separate these individual behaviors from social factors.
One of the other things that we spoke about this, in fact, when you were last here, and I know it was the subject very much of your last book, which was about a failure to understand the connection between mind and body. It strikes me that we are doing better at that. You know, you talk about this dislocation in modern medicine between understanding that what's going on in the body is so influenced by the mind and how adversely that affects the way we treat illness. Do you think over the last years that is something that we are addressing as a society?
I wish I could say so. What is true is that there's much more awareness. I mean, for my new book, I collected something like multiple thousands of research papers, which have been generated at increasing quantity and quality over the last decades. The problem is that that research awareness has not entered clinical practice yet. So literally most physicians wouldn't know what the heck I was talking about right now, by not through their education, the average medical student in North America, and I would gauge in the UK as well, never gets a single lecture on trauma or its impacts on brain development. They don't get a single lecture on unity of mind and body, which is only non-controversial medical fact, or scientific fact, I should say. So there's a little, let alone on a social level, where we're still fighting this war on drugs, which is really a war on, there's no war on inanimate objects. You can't war on drugs. There's a war on drug addicts. In other words, there's a war on the more traumatized sections of our population. So on the one hand, we have this incontrovertible and voluminous research information, of which there's more and more awareness. More and more groups, more and more people are embracing this new knowledge. But that new knowledge, sadly, has yet to penetrate much of medical practice, including addiction treatment, and certainly the legal system or social policy. So there's a gap. There's what I would call a science policy gap.
And you say, so where I was thinking about that reading your book was very much to do with the treatments that you suggest, and we won't have time to go into all the various ways that you look at it. We've talked a lot about this idea of showing compassion towards addicts, more compassion towards addicts, but one of the most important things that you write about is the notion of the power of compassionate curiosity, compassion towards ourselves. And that's what I was getting at when I was wondering whether you think things have improved. You talk a lot about this very interesting idea of mental hygiene and the idea of sort of looking at ourselves much more to examine what's going on, to kind of look at the patterns we are following, examine our addictions, see where they come from. That is essentially mindfulness, which we do talk about and try, I think, to incorporate in society more today than perhaps we have in the past.
Yes, that's true. And I see that as a really positive trend. But mindfulness needs to be associated, or at least allied with, deep curiosity and insight as well. And so if you're an addicted person or somebody who's had addictions, listen to this conversation, you need to be compassionate to yourself. You need to say, no, what's wrong with me? But why did I do all that? What purpose did it serve? Oh, it helps soothe my pain. Well, that's a totally different approach. If you're a parent or a relative of somebody with addictive patterns, instead of, what's wrong with them? Why don't they give it up? You can say, well, why don't they give it up? What is it doing for them? What's the benefit? And what were the circumstances in their lives that encompassed the whole multi-generational family system that gave rise to their pain? And sometimes people say, well, how come three kids grow up in the same family and one of them becomes an addict and the other one doesn't? Good question. Two answers. One is, no two children grow up in the same family. No two children have the same parents, because they come along at different stages of the parents' lives. The parents see them differently, and they're different in the birth order, so there's different pressures on them, number one. Number two, there is such a thing as genetic sensitivity. Not genetic addiction. Addiction is not a disease, and it's certainly not a genetic disease. But if a child is more sensitive, then the same events will have a much greater impact on them. So the more sensitive you are, the more hurt you're going to be. The more creative you're going to be, the more intuitive you're going to be, and the more hurt you're going to be. The more hurt you are, the more you have to escape from your pain. So the great British child psychiatrist D.W. Winnicott said once that if a mother could be the same mother to all 8 of her children, which she couldn't be, he said, but if she could be, they still would have 8 different mothers, because they would all be experiencing her through their own particular temperament.
It's interesting, though, the sort of idea you bring up actually of sensitivity, because one of the things that one of your patients said to you was the importance of having a soft heart. And we're talking about compassion, the importance of showing ourselves more compassion when we're trying to, you know, as a cure, as a way of getting out of it. So it is a careful balance, because soft-heartedness and compassion seems to me where you end up as being one of the most important ways to overcome an addiction.
Well, if we want people to give up their addictions, if our goal is to help them become fully who they are, where they don't have this emptiness that they have to keep filling from the outside, they need a lot of compassion. And compassion I distinguish on several different levels. There is the compassion of just ordinary human compassion, which is, I don't like to see people suffer. I don't like people to suffer. That's good. That's healthy. That's natural, but it's not enough. It has to be deepened by the compassion of understanding, where you actually say, not only do I not want this person to suffer, I want to understand why they're suffering. Otherwise, how can I help them? So then you start asking these questions that I've been addressing in this conversation. On the third level, there's what I call the compassion of recognition, where you see that, they're not different from me. I recognize the same things in myself. Therefore, I'm in no position to be above them, you know, to judge them. We're two people, equal, in significant ways, sharing the same experience. And I could go on, but there's different levels of compassion, but it's absolutely essential for helping addicted people. And as one of my teachers, A.H. Alma, says, only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth. You want people to see the truth? They can only do so when they feel safe.
And if you are talking to people who are listening, who are here to support families, friends, caregivers, you have a note to them at the end of your book. Ultimately, it must come from the addict themselves.
Yes. So my advice to families, parents, caregivers, adult children, friends of people with addictions is that there's three ways you can be in relationship to your addicted relative or friend. Two of them are insane. One of them is sane. One way is you can be in their lives and try to change them. That's insane. It means that you're codependent. It means that your feeling better depends on them feeling better. So now you're dependent on somebody who's dependent. That's what codependency means. Doesn't work. Because the basic trauma that we all experience, and it doesn't take abuse or terrible circumstances, is that we're not accepted for who we were. Now, if you want to approach your addicted client or friend or relative with the same, I don't accept who you are, I want you to be different, for me to be happy, that's to invite resistance. It's insanity.
So do you...
The other ways to be in their lives is I'll be in your life and I'll let you walk all over me, and I'll sacrifice myself no matter how much I'm hurt by what you do. That's also insane. What is sane, if the other person's behavior to themselves is causing you too much pain, you can't handle it, to say to them, look, I love you very much. I can't handle the pain that I feel when I see you. So right now I cannot be in your life. That's totally healthy. But the only sane way to be in their lives is to say, I see that what you're doing is something you need to do right now. Why you need to do it, that's your own affair. But I'm here to support you and to love you. But I'm not going to take on trying to change you. That's the only sane thing to do.
Before I hand over to the audience for what I'm sure will be many, many interesting questions, can I ask you about something? You say that people who are trying to come out of an addiction find often the most difficult of the 12 steps, which is something that many people turn to. I think it's step number 2, which is the idea of needing to fill this void we've spoken about a lot over the past hour with something spiritual. With a God, essentially. And I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more of that. People find that there are people who find that an uncomfortable idea. Is that a necessary way of curing an addiction? Do you need a belief in a higher power to be there with you?
Well, yes and no. The 12 steps in themselves, I find they're very essential steps for a healthy, balanced life, addicted or not addicted.
Mm.
Unfortunately, they arose out of a tradition of what was essentially fundamentalist Christianity. So they're framed in those terms. And for a lot of people who might have grown up in where religion was beaten down their throats when they were children, it's disconcerting and repulsive to be told that now you have to believe in a God in order to heal. But if you see beyond the language, the sense of a higher power does not imply some entity in the sky. Doesn't have to. It can if that's what you believe. Doesn't need to. I certainly don't. Never have. But when you say higher power, higher than what? Well, there's my little conditioned ego with its fears and its emptiness and its self-serving beliefs and its defensiveness, its belief that I'm not lovable, that I'm not good enough. Well, there's the higher power in me, which is my deeper awareness that there's more to my reality than just that. And there's my innate goodness and conscience and capacity to see beyond the machinations of my little narcissistic ego, which, believes me, is a very active force in my mind. I confront it every day. I deal with it every day. So there's something higher than that. And that's your higher power. If you want to take it to some spiritual level of universal unity, connection, Christ nature, Buddha nature, that's fine. Nobody can prescribe that for you. But yeah, there's something higher in all of us than our little egos. And that's what the higher power means to me.
There are so many more things we could talk about, but I feel I mustn't dominate the rest, because we've got time now for the bit that I know you want, looking forward to getting to, which is of course welcoming other people in to ask their questions. So as Esme said at the beginning, if you would you want to pose an initial question again, Gabor, or shall I invite people to pose theirs? Did you want to ask one?
No, you know what? I think I've answered that one. That's just about what does the addiction do for you? And I think I kind of preempted that one by giving you the various answers I've received already. So we don't need to deal with that one.
Okay. So if I could invite you to...
So we're going to stop at this point and transition. We are incredibly honored to be in the presence of Mr. Don Koyas, the founder and president of White Bison and the Sobriety movement. Always such an honor to see Mr. Koyas, and he is gracing us with his presence today. And not only is he present, he is going to give us his commentary on the listening to Dr. Mate and kind of share with us what resonated with Mr. Koyas, and also, you know, maybe some key points about what key points that were discussed and what that means for Indian country and Native people and their lives in Indian country. So, Mr. Koyas, thank you for being with us.
All right. Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, I guess, depending upon where you live. I could listen to that doctor. I've watched a lot of his various tapes on YouTube, and he is so insightful and so connected with what happens in our Native communities. He just talks, and when you hear him speak, you go, oh, I know exactly what you mean, because that's how it was for me. That's how it is in the communities that we work in, and so I'm really honored to be here. I have just a little bit about myself. I have made 78 trips around the sun. And of those trips, I'm coming up on 44 years of continuous sobriety. And so that was a continuous. So I got sober in my 30s. And I have 9 children, 6 girls, 3 boys. And out of that, I have 20 grandkids and 1 great grandchild. All my children now they're no longer struggling with alcohol. They're all sober. And my grandchildren, that's the same there. It wasn't always like that. It took years of counseling and healing and sweat lodges and setbacks and talking circles, and but eventually our family got together. And today it's not like Ozzie and Harriet family either. We have our difficulties, like families do, but we have this little saying amongst ourselves. We say, let's settle our differences before the sun sets. So often you'll see some kind of conflict might happen, and then you got this thought going through your mind, how do I solve and get this thing calmed down by the time the sun sets? And so we've been fairly good at doing that. And so I do know that recovery works. I know it's a family disease. I know it can be healed. I know it's not going to happen overnight. And I would say that we had every tool we could think of, from counseling to Alateen to Al-Anon. At different times we had all of that in there, in there helping us. Then in the late 1988, I think it was, I came out of a meeting, and I had realized I was really 4 years sober. I didn't cheat, I didn't lie, I didn't steal. It was really done things, and I was slowly getting my family back together. And I sat outside, and I just was having this conversation with the Creator, and I said, if it's your way, I would like to be able to carry this message of recovery to my people, because it is possible. I know it's possible because it was happening to me. And so it was very shortly after that, things started to happen, and we formed an organization called White Bison. And it was actually kind of formed out of a vision. Initially, I had this vision of this white bison raising up out of the ground, and then it slowly looked at me with real black eyes, and then it slowly went back down in the ground. And I wasn't sober long enough to understand hardly anything. So I took this to the couple of elders that I knew, and thank God that I just thought I was having a dream. But when they questioned me, they said no. They said, that means you're being called to do something. They said, if you was a Christian, you would have seen an angel. But they said, because of how you are, the angel shaped itself into a buffalo. And that way you would understand it. But it was very white, and had a very spiritual connection. And so through that, that's how we got going in this recovery business. We hadn't really planned on it. I just thought I would work with small groups, but eventually we formed a nonprofit. And then the smartest thing we done is we formed a council of elders. So we got elders from various factions throughout the United States, and they started to guide us. And the very first community we worked with, we went up there and every month, and we worked with a group, and we made no progress. And I couldn't believe that I quit this corporate job, and And then I heard this wrath of my mother, saying, I told you not to do that. You got to hear that. But eventually, I had a mentor then. His name was Johnny Looking Cloud. And I was telling him I was going to quit. I said, there's no way you can change a Native community. In this community, they had 85% alcoholism. They had abuses going on. The council was all drinking, and it had been going on for a long time. And I felt my skills that I looked at. I said, this community is in a downward spiral. You can't pull it out. And so I was going to quit. And then my mentor said, can you bring together the elders? So I did. I brought together 40 elders, and then we explained to them what we saw going on in this community, and we felt that it couldn't change. And they said, no, they said it can change. So they said, where did you get your information from? And I said, well, Google. And they said, well, no wonder. They said, what you are looking for is not on Google. What they said is go to the elders and ask them, what did your grandma and grandmas tell you about how our communities used to be a long time ago? What was that like? What was the families like? How did they handle problems? How did they choose leadership? And as we started to do that, if you can imagine, some of these were 80, 90 years old, and they would go back in their memory and tell us how it was. And we found out there was a time when our communities did not have the problems that we have today. They didn't have those problems. They didn't have jails. They didn't have counseling. There was something going on there that they knew. And so that changed our approach. And so what we learned from them is that the original teachings that came to our community, it was from nature. The old people, they watched the animals, and they watched the birds, and they found out they could go into the spiritual world. And they learned there was seasons, and there was cycles, there was some type of intelligence system. And as they did that, then they started to mimic, and they started to listen to those ways of life. And then pretty soon we had communities living in harmony. They knew how to raise children. They knew how to parent. They knew how to solve and resolve conflict. They knew all of this. And we didn't know that there was a time existed, because Google never told us about any time like that existed. And so what this group of 40 elders told us is, they said, we're going to help you. They said, we're going to give you, if you want to change a community, you must do it by spiritual law, not by evidence-based grants from the government. They said, you've got to follow the law. And so they said, we're going to give you 4 laws. If you implement them, then they said, what will happen is we'll give you more teachings, they called it. And so we started to hear things that we had never heard in our whole lives. Like, for example, they would say, the Creator, when he designed our earth, did so with a set of principle, laws, and values. So they said, I thought I knew about these principle, laws, and values, because in the boarding school that I went to, I found out you're supposed to get the information from God. But if God was mad at you because you didn't do things right, then you never got the information. And of course, I never did things as right. So I was just destined to be lost, I guess. But what they told us is, they said, where this information is hidden, it's hidden inside of yourself. Inside of every human being is an innate knowledge of your own well-being. Inside of you is the ancestors from a long time ago. A long time ago, we found out, as we hung out with these elders, we found out, like, for example, quick example is, when the Europeans came to this country, they had knowledge of 10 plants. That's how their medical system was based on. So all the treatment they did was off of 10 plants. At that same time, in our communities, we had knowledge of 128 plants. We knew all sorts of medicines that nobody else knew. How come? Because of this brilliance. I list up this word of brilliance, because now this, you can have this talk with Indian people, but sometimes you can't. But what our people learned was, they learned to talk to that plant. They learned to communicate with that spirit of that plant, and that plant would tell them exactly what they were supposed to do. Some places you mention this, and they'll just roll their eyes, but we know that's not true. We know that our elders knew. My grandpa, I watched him talk to plants. And so we would sometimes go pick medicine, and he would only pick so much out of that patch of medicine. I was a young kid, and I think, wow, we can chop all this medicine down and get out of here and get going. But he would not do it that way. So what he explained to me was, in our language, there's a word for connectedness. And he says, it's like, if you ever notice when your eye looks at somebody, a second later, there's a feeling goes across. Then you nod when that feeling goes across. So when he looked at a plant, if he had that connectedness there, that's a plant that we would pick because it was ready. If you looked at another plant and that connectedness wasn't there, we didn't pick that plant. This is the way he lived his life. He was just that way. And so our ancestors, that's the way they were. They knew about stars. To this day, NASA flies elders down to Florida, and they have them consult with them about what they knew about the stars and about that powers of that. How come? Because they knew this a long time ago. They had the ability to build a dwelling where when the sun was in a certain place every year, it would shine a beam of light through that hole. They knew exactly how to position that so this thing would happen. So I could go on and on and on, but our people were brilliant. We were scientist minded. We were very observant. We had the spiritual knowledge, and that was how we did a lot of things. And so what we found out in this Sobriety movement is that we started to bring back in the culture. That's where this secret was. It wasn't necessarily in federal grants with evidence-based things. We found out it was bringing back culture. It was bringing back the teachings. It was finding out about things about the cycle of life and finding out about the 4 directions of growth: emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. When we started to get those teachings from the elders, the natural order was individual, family, community, nation. You had to develop exactly in that way. And then so what we found out was, it wasn't that we had to gain something to work in getting sober, is we had to remove blockages from the boarding school and the shame, and from a whole lot of places. We had built anger, fear, blockages, and pretty soon we were not able to see. But we found out when the elders helped us to start to bring back the culture, and how do you remove shame, and how do you remove guilt, and how do you remove things that happened in the boarding school. We didn't even know there was a connectedness between the boarding school and our current social issues until about 10 years ago, when Dr. Maria Braveheart and Dr. Duran and some of our own Native researchers started to see this connectedness. I was at an NIH conference a few years ago, both here and in Canada. First time I ever heard that the trauma is written in a layer of our DNA, and then it's passed down to that next generation. I did not even sleep when I heard that science was saying this is what is going on. When we started to find out, how do you look at trauma? How do you look at the healing? How do you look at the abuses that went on? How do you look at sexual abuse? You had to take on some tough issues that nobody wanted to look at, because that's what was blocking us from this brilliance that was in our blueprint. It's just like the salmon has a blueprint that makes it to be the way it is. The moose has it, the dandelion has it, and we have it. We have this innate knowledge that all you got to do is remove the blockages, and all of a sudden you start to see how the Creator really made us. And so I love this theme on brilliance, because I can tell you, it's our youth. I don't know how many recovery people I've seen get into recovery, and they become writers and counselors and doctors and scientists and just all sorts of things. It just comes out, So I want to thank you for helping spread this message of brilliance, because it's true. You can look at somebody who's drinking, and what if you are just give it a little time, you look in there and you'll see that brilliance. You'll see that in there because you'll connect to it. And so I just want to thank you for allowing me to share a few minutes on our Sobriety movement and what we've discovered going on. We know today there are thousands of us sober. Thousands of us are sober, not crap sobriety either. Culture and Sundance and sweats and ceremony and fun and laughter and all those things that used to be in our original community. So thank you for allowing me to share a few minutes of what the creator and what the elders have showed us in this White Bison and Sobriety movement.
Thank you, Mr. Koyas. Again, what an honor to hear your story, and you just really have, I'm sure, enlightened everybody. And thank you for telling us your origin story too about Sobriety and White Bison. So we're going to transition now. I almost hate to leave Mr. Koyas and transition because I'm so enthralled by what he always to hear you speak. And I appreciate the trips around the sun that you have taken and all the knowledge that you've picked up, of course. So anyway, let's just go ahead and force myself to transition to some summary closing remarks. And I do want to remind you all, everyone that's on the call, that next month we're continuing with the Sobriety, and next month we'll feature Kateri Koyas, Don's daughter, who's the executive director of White Bison. And so she'll be speaking next month, so more to come. But for now, let me ask Dr. Brown, who's my friend and colleague, if he has any summary comments he'd like to make.
Wow. We're so honored to hear from Mr. Koyas today. And thank you very much for your words and for sharing with us today. I am almost speechless after listening to such brilliance. I've been in Indian health now for a third of a century. I've made about 33 trips around the sun since I started as a young physician in Indian country. And I've always been struck by the resilience of Native people. And that comes from that brilliance that they all carry inside. At least that's been my own observation personally. Currently, besides being an epidemiologist for the Tribal Epidemiology Center in Nashville with USET, I work as an inpatient physician for the Eastern Band of Cherokee, where I have spent many years there. And many of the patients that I see on the inpatient unit have been, their health, their physical health, as well as their mental and spiritual health has been severely impacted by addiction, either to alcohol or drugs or both. And that is one of those blockages, I think. And if we can remove those blockages, as Mr. Koyas said, then we can get people in touch with that hidden brilliance inside them. I loved those words, and I also love that you said the smartest thing that you did when you started White Bison was that you formed a council of elders. And although I do agree that Native youth is brilliant, that brilliance just continues to be polished over time. And I think one of the real strengths of Indian communities is that they value their elders and seek out their wisdom. And that is something that I don't see so much in the dominant culture here in the United States or the Western world. We worship youth. And we really should pay a lot more attention to our elders. And I think Mr. Koyas certainly embodies that brilliance and that wisdom in so many ways. I was struck by a couple of things that Dr. Gabor Mate said. One was, the more sensitive you are, the more hurt you're going to be. And I think that's very true. Certainly a lot of the people that I see who suffer a lot of hurt, they're very sensitive people when you get to know them. You know, when you get past that sort of exterior of unwellness, maybe, and you get in touch with who they really are, you find that they're very, very sensitive people. The other thing that Dr. Mate said that really kind of impacted me, I think, was that compassion is essential to care for people with it. So for everybody on the call today, all of us have compassion to one degree or another. And it's very important to get in touch with that compassion and to stay in touch with that compassion and to use it every day. So I'm going to stop there. I don't know if maybe we have some comments from our audience.
I'm reading the chat. I'm not seeing anything yet, but just to follow up for a second, Dr. Brown, that the blockages that Mr. Koyas talks about, sometimes I refer to that as the weight, that kind of is heavy weight that kind of suffocates that brilliance, but it's still there. And it's our job to, through compassion and through our training, through our beliefs, is to help Native people lift that burden off of them so that they can see that innate brilliance. The one thing I just want to share with you all real quick before we transition is one of the things that Dr. Mate talks about, and not in this video, but in other ones, which is an example of the pain and the shame and the guilt that Mr. Koyas talked about with some of his patients, is one patient told him, very much living in the addiction world, and he said, "I'm not afraid of dying, I'm afraid of living." And that really resonates with me, to think about how true those words are for people that are suffering and have the burdens of guilt and shame and heavy weights on their shoulders. So with that, and somebody wants us to reinforce the statement that Dr. Mate made about how this, when he was talking about insanity and sanity, he was saying that what is sane is when someone in your family, I think was his example, is struggling with addiction. The sane approach, the healthy approach is what he was trying to say, I believe, is I love you, but I can't handle the pain that your behavior is causing me. Therefore, I cannot be in your life right now. That was his example of the sane response. So thank you, Elizabeth, for bringing that up. We always end with a video, and we have a couple of things to show you. So don't leave I know some people need to leave at the top of the hour, but we have another great tribal spoken word to share with you after Bernice goes through a couple of pieces of information.
Brian.
Yes, please don't forget to complete your survey. It helps us with future programming. And just email us if you have any questions or concerns at our email addresses on the screen.
And then just to say something real quick about the resource slide. We list the websites for White Bison, Sobriety Movement, the Dr. Mate's video that we showed, as well as the wisdom of trauma, the trailer for that, which is really something to see. What we forgot, but we will add them before you all will receive all of this PowerPoint and information before the end of the week, I believe. But we forgot to add the link. We always add the links of the video, the music video we showed at the beginning, and then the video that we're going to close with. So know that you'll get those in the link too. We'll fix that. We'll add them to the resource. So before we go into the video, I just want to thank Mr. Koyas again for honoring us, and the admiration that we have and we hope we shared with you all with Dr. Mate and his work. And thanks again to the great USET team. So I think we're going to go into the spoken word. Do you have anything you want to introduce about it, Bernice?
Oh, I don't. I just wanted to say thank you as well, and see everybody next month for the next session.
Fantastic. Which will be well Brady.
I will not be quiet. We, as Indigenous women, have so much to lose, to exist in silence while our people drown themselves in booze, trying to erase the memory of a damaged generation. But it's easier to stay quiet than to heal an entire nation, so we suffer. I will not be quiet. Our families were forced to keep their mouths closed, and until we choose to speak, the outside world cannot begin to know how deeply and how badly we still feel the pain, how the patterns strain my brain, leave me feeling insane, because I carry a world of hurt on my shoulders, and the heaviness only increases as I get older. So I will not be quiet or try to hide the cycles of repetition that our families and our communities have been perpetually living in. I refuse to carry the guilt or the shame from being sexually abused by the system in place that was created with the intention of keeping us safe. No, I will not shut up, and I will not sit down until our 1,200 missing sisters are found. I will scream. I will scream and I will yell because they have been silenced. I will fight the silent battle with our women against violence, and the most violent and benevolent being could not keep me from speaking the true meaning of free. I will not be quiet as the system steals our babies and keeps us living with less. The genocide isn't over. It just has a new name, CFS. No, when they told us they'd keep us safe, they lied. If this was the case, why are there so many suicides? Why did my best friend suffer so deeply inside that he felt the need to take his own life when he hadn't even lived yet? Why do our parents carry so much regret? Why has so much damage come to our women? Why at the age of 12 did I become a victim of sexual assault? And not just me, but so many of my friends and my family. Women and girls who are beautiful beyond explanation. Their bodies to become used and abused, just another violation on an Indigenous woman. Why are 75% of us raped? Why are our houses constantly surrounded by yellow tape? See, the system was designed to have us take our own lives, to keep the blood-stained hands of the guilty clean and keep the death on the hands of our children and our babies. And as long as we are idle and silent, our children will keep dying because they are surrounded by violence. Violence and addictions, confused by the abuse and how badly they must hurt to want to tie a noose around their neck or stick a gun to their head, when at the same time some pale-faced children lay peacefully in their beds while our babies are dying, while our children are crying. Until we speak and stand up as a family, we are going to keep losing our girls to the streets, and our lives will be conquered by the blood that we see, and instead of the knowledge our children will seek to erase the history of our grandparents deceased who died enraged at the people we would turn out to be. Because without our knowledge, stories, and our tradition. We have become the ones who caged us in this hell we are living in. So no, I will not be quiet.
Fabulous spoken word by Mary Black of Ojibwa Nation. Another example of brilliance and passion. And Mr. Koyas, when we unleash all of that